Dr. Belinda Margetts, Senior Freshwater Ecologist at DRNZ. We'd like to show you a video we made in March 2024 about a project we've been working on, Whiri Whiri Ora, which is funded by our Land and Water. It's working with the Waimakariri Land Care Trust to look at alternative land uses to improve the environmental sustainability of farming. So this is really important in the Waimakariri catchment because it has really high levels of nitrogen, which is a regulatory challenge for the farmers in that area. So, for example, the Kaiapoi River or the Silver Stream has around 4 times higher nitrogen levels than what's required under the national bottom line of 2.4 milligrams per litre. Even though nitrogen is important, we also need to be thinking about what lives in our waterways, the fish and the insects, and what else we can be doing, which is equally important to improve water body health. So things like improving habitat. So that's the purpose of this video. We want to take you on a journey to show you 3 different waterways. The first is a small spring-fed tributary of the Kaiapoi River. That's to show you that these small waterways still do have values. The second is to take you to the Kaiapoi River or Silver Stream with high nitrate levels that I just mentioned to you before. The third is to take you to a larger river, the Cuss River, which also has relatively high levels of nitrate. So, step into my outdoor office.
So this is a really good example of what a lot of people call a drain, and often these are waterways which have been drained to wetlands, or they're straightened natural channels, and sometimes they can even be fully artificial. But even though they are potentially called drains, they do have some values. So they, even though they're in the upper catchment, they can have some connectivity to what's happening downstream, to other water bodies downstream or waterways, and that means that there's an opportunity for fish to move up into these areas, and insects as well can come in and build a home. So when you look at this, you might think, oh, there's probably nothing that's living in here, but you really don't know until you have a closer look. So let's have a look. So what we've caught here is an eel. There's 2 main species of eels in New Zealand. There's the shortfin and the longfin. They're also known as tuna because they're important in the hingakai species for Māori. And the way that we identify whether an eel is a shortfin or a longfin is by looking at the size of their fins. So their fins run from the top all the way down to the bottom of their body. A shortfin, the fin at the bottom and the top are pretty much at the same location. For a long fin, the fin at the top is a lot further forward than at the bottom. Longfin eels have a conservation status of at-risk declining, so they're particularly important to look after in your waterways. So when we want to find out what fish are in a waterway, there's 3 different ways we can do that. We can take some water samples and look at the eDNA. We can set some traps, so things like fight nets, and we can also do electric fishing. So here we've got an electric fishing machine. In here we've got some batteries, and what happens is a charge gets sent through to this wand. We put it in the water and the charge goes out, and if there's any fish nearby, they get pulled out and stunned, not harmed, but it allows us then to be able to scoop them up with our net and put them into a bucket. And so there's lots of different places that we might find the fish. We can potentially find them under the overhanging bits of the bank. So lots of eels like to hide under there or under overhanging vegetation. So you might need to pull them out. And then also we use other nets downstream where we can catch the smaller fish and pull the charge through the faster flowing riffle area. And that's the easiest way really to see what's in there. And we use the different techniques for different reasons. Some fish are easier to find in using traps, and some fish are easier to find using electric fishing. This waterway here is a really good example of one that doesn't really have ideal riparian planting. It's great that there is some fencing and there is some grass, which will do some filtering of runoff that comes off the land into the waterway, but there is a whole lot more that can be achieved with doing riparian planting of predominantly native species. So you can see here that there's some bank stabilization issues, the bank is a little bit unstable. If you plant it up with some really good species that are able to bind the soil, you'll be able to prevent that erosion, increase the bank stabilization, and that'll stop sediment coming into the waterway. And that's good because sediment is not really very healthy for what lives in the waterway. We can have quite a lot of light that gets in here, which can increase the temperature of the water, and that's not good for fish predominantly. But also what it does is it encourages lots of light for nuisance aquatic plants to grow, and that means then that the waterways tend to get a bit clogged up because the macrophytes or the aquatic plants grow, they trap sediment, and so then you start getting the sediment can't flush through the system, and then also it just makes things a bit slower in terms of water flow. So planting up with tall shading trees will shade out those aquatic plants, and that's really important. Riparian planting is really good for biodiversity or things that live in the stream, but there's also some co-benefits for your farm. So over time, when you don't have the riparian planting that stabilizes the banks, your banks will start to recede, and you'll lose more of your farming area. So planting up the banks is a great way to stabilize and stop that ingress of banks. The other thing is, if we are shading the stream and reducing those aquatic plants, that's less maintenance for you. That's less maintenance in terms of having to spray weeds or remove weeds, but also the accumulation of sediment that you might need to remove, because when the aquatic plants are gone, then you'll get a better flow to flush through sediment through the system. So let's go and find a place that has really good riparian planting. So the site that we're in now is the Kaipoi River, but up the top in the headwaters. And so this site actually records quite high nitrate levels, 6 to 8 milligrams per litre, if you understand how that's quite a high concentration for a waterway. Oh, we've got a bully there. Oh, actually, it's a little trout. Right. So it shows that even though we've got high nitrate levels, which is not ideal because it can be toxic to fish. So this is a great spot to show you the difference between really good riparian planting and not so good riparian planting. So it's the same stream, it's the same water flowing through it, but we look down here and it's all shaded, so you have lower water temperatures, you don't have the aquatic weed that's growing, and you've got faster flowing habitat. Up here you've got less shading species, so you start to get this aquatic weed growing, and then that's going to trap more sediment and it's going to clog up the stream and slow down the flow. And interestingly too, when we fished, we find most of our fish down here, a diversity of fish down here with more bullies and faster flowing specialists as well, whereas up here, not so much. So the good thing about this site is it has a really nice hard bottom with some cobbles and boulders, and it also has this really good fast flowing riffle area, and fish like that. It oxygenates the water, flushes all the sediment through, but it also creates specialist habitat for a range of different species. So in these faster flowing areas, we often find fast water specialists like bluegill bullies and also young juvenile eels. They like to be in this location, whereas the slower flowing sort of bank habitat with pools and runs, the slower flowing areas, that's where you find your big eels, your large-bodied eels, and then also other things like inanga, which is one of the main whitebait species. They prefer to sort of have that slower flowing area. So if you want to get a diversity of fish, it's really good if you have a diversity of habitat. So what we've caught here is a number of different types of fish. We've got a juvenile eel, and we've also got some bullies, and we've got some trout as well. And we've actually also caught a little insect which is sitting in the bottom of the bucket, and that's a mayfly, which is quite sensitive to water quality. And we've also got trout, which are one of the most sensitive fish species to things like nitrate. So what this tells me is that there's great potential here. So this mayfly here, he actually has this larval phase or younger phase in the water, and then he'll emerge into a mayfly that flies around outside of the water, so a terrestrial or land-based insect. And then that adult will come back, lay eggs in the stream, and then the eggs will hatch into this guy, and then this guy will turn into an adult, and that's the circle of life there. And these insects are the building blocks as they feed the fish. So everything is working together to create a healthy system. So this guy here, he'll probably only live for a day or two. He doesn't stay in this phase for very long. So you've got a caddisfly there. So that's, you see, oh, you might be able to see his little head poking out of there. And then I think this is mayfly, but it's kind of hard to see his tail. He's either a mayfly or a stonefly. So yeah, these guys are all quite sensitive, so they'd give you a high MCI score. So on the margin of this waterway, there is some watercress, which is a Mahingakai species for Māori. Oh, sometimes you just don't know what you're going to get to. Lift the net up. Should just give them, yep, and then just above your hand, there's two bullies. Just flick them down, yep. So to try and avoid getting this algae growing, again, it's another reason to have shading vegetation, because algae becomes nuisance levels when it has lots of sunlight, high temperatures, and also nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus. So if we can take away one of those things, that will help prevent nuisance growth. So shading is something that we can control on the short term, and then if we work together as a catchment to reduce those nutrients, that will help as well. So this is much faster flowing, so this will be interesting. Oh my goodness, so that was about 20 seconds maybe of putting the current on. 10 seconds then. Look at them all. Was it torrent fish? Yeah. Woo, we got a torrent fish. Yes. They're my favourite. They're my favourite too. They're pretty hard to get. They like fast flowing. Yeah. So another way you can work out what's in your stream is use this relatively new technique called eDNA. And the E stands for environmental, and DNA is just the genetic material that all living things have. So we can actually take a sample of water from a stream, send that to a lab, and they can work out from little shreds of DNA that have been left behind what animals, plants, fungi, all sorts of things live in the waterway, or what remains have been left in the waterway. So that's a really easy and relatively cheap way if you want to find out what is living in your waterways. It doesn't necessarily tell you how many fish are there, what size they are, but it gives a really good indication. So for example, if you find a result that comes back that is for a species that has a conservation status or is threatened, then that's a really great indicator of maybe doing some more investigations to find out how we might be able to help those species. And the other thing is that the eDNA sample that you send to the lab, it comes back with basically a health score, and it can tell you whether, based on what we've recorded in other waterways around New Zealand, whether you've got a waterway which is more poor health or very good health. So if you want to give eDNA a try, you could talk to your local regional council, you could get your local school involved, your community, your catchment group, just to talk about what's found in your catchment or in your waterway. And it's a relatively easy thing to do, and your regional council can provide advice on that. So I think the important thing to remember about water body health is it's like a whole puzzle. And if you just focus on one piece of the puzzle, so if you only focus on nutrients, or if you only focus on riparian planting, you won't be able to complete the whole puzzle. So we need to have a holistic approach and address as much as we can all of the pieces of the puzzle.